Hello and welcome to the red and blue carpet premiere of the Reunited States. And thank you so much for being here. Our nation is divided. We are split not just within our government, but within our communities and our families. We're surrounded by conflict on the macro and the micro levels, and it is soul-crushing. We can't continue down this path. But how do we get to unity? Is achieving this ideal even possible? What level of reconciliation and accountability is necessary not only to move past the hurts of the present, but the long, long history of hurts of our past? Well, the people you're about to meet tonight don't just think it's possible to heal our divisions. They are already doing it. They are finding their way through immediate and generational trauma and anger and to real and meaningful progress. Sometimes slow, sometimes rocky, and rarely perfect, but progress. And that's why the Reunited States is so important right now. These problems extend beyond political affiliation, and it's going to take people of most parties and philosophies willing to do this work to sustain that progress. Several of them are featured in this project, and their work is so critical. Lives depend on bipartisan cooperation to advance the American agenda and the equity agenda. The people this film profiles have stories which are inspiring, not just of the work that they're doing, but because they can inspire the rest of us to follow the trail that they are blazing. For those of you who haven't seen it, here's the trailer. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Our country is very divided right now.
Folks were physically attacking one another.
The root causes of division go all the way down into our foundation as a country.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
Stop! Stop!
If we're going to live in a democracy, all of us have to learn to be mediators and bridge builders.
My daughter would tell you, let's get on to the issues that she died for.
The divisions are happening in our neighborhoods, they're happening in our schools, and they're happening in our families.
We decided to travel to all 50 states to get an understanding of what was causing these divisions.
Issues we'll inherit are not so much dividing between the left versus right, but really the future versus the past. We decided to create the first ever caucus for young members of Congress.
I want to create a third force in our politics that's able to get us beyond this partisan warfare.
Meeting people across the country who have a passion to see our divisions healed, that gives me hope.
To have someone look at me as if we don't deserve to be respected, we don't deserve to be treated fairly, it does something to you.
We get uranium, we get murder, we get alcohol. Nobody's doing nothing about it.
I wish there was something I could do to help her.
I don't want other mothers to go through this.
This country needs bridge builders.
Don't be afraid to reach out to someone who might not believe exactly like you believe.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Rickey. I'm the director of the Reunited States, and I'm really excited to see all of you here tonight and just very inspired at the turnout about how many people are here. You know, there's this narrative out there about how divided we are, and it's true. A lot of us have lost friendships and family relationships over political disagreements. But there's another narrative out there, and I've seen it in filming this documentary and traveling all across this country for the past 2.5 years, that the narrative that there's hope for us, that there are people that are bridging our divides, that are literally holding this country together through this very difficult time. and they're in every town and every city and every state across this great nation. And we wanted to highlight those stories because we need a little hope in our lives right now to understand that there is a movement happening. There are people doing this. And you know what? Maybe they're providing solutions for the rest of us to do the same. So tonight you're going to meet a lot of them. This is really a celebration of people in towns and cities across this country that are doing this work. Thanks so much to Alyssa for kicking us off tonight. And we're excited to have Van Jones and Megan McCain with us later in the evening. So please stick around. You'll notice that there's a chat function on the side here. Put your comments in there, any questions that you have. Our team is going to be monitoring that and answering any questions. And there'll be a lot of information coming through that about solutions and things to follow up on if you're so inspired. In talking about the people across this country, I wanted to start this evening with a friend of mine who you saw in the trailer just now. And so let me see if I can bring him into the discussion. Bear, are you there?
Sure.
Hey, Bear, can you tell people where you're calling in from tonight?
I'm joining you from Shiprock, New Mexico on the Navajo Reservation.
Some people who are with us tonight have seen the documentary, but a lot of people haven't. Can you tell us what we caught up with you on that day of filming and what's been happening for you since then?
Well, I was feeding homeless when you guys showed up at my door. We all went out and had a day, and I showed you around. And with asthma and high blood pressure that I have, I can't risk going out. And so I had to leave that alone. And that hurts because I know that they're hungry.
Bear, obviously we're still in the middle of this pandemic, and it's affected a lot of communities significantly more than others. Can you tell us what's happening out on the reservation? How's it going out there?
I'm really scared right now, and nothing's being done for the high-risk people in this community, which is one of the hardest hit community of the nation. It's terrible. We're talking about whole families being passed away, and fathers and mothers, preachers, teachers. There's no distinction between who goes. If you're out in it and you get sick, it's very difficult. We hear the helicopter all the time in the night.
Bear, what's going on? Are you all right?
Just pain. People that are gone. My coach, our neighbors, the pastors and their kids. It's gone.
I'm so sorry, Bear.
It's terrible. But then you find the strength to ask the Creator to help all of us. You've got to find the strength to stand, no matter how hard it hurts. You got to pull that strength up from inside your spirit to stand and be defiant and be willing to help, be willing to speak, be willing to share. What I would say is that it doesn't matter if you're red. It doesn't matter if you're blue. When you strip those colors away from you, we are human beings and we are family. And family needs to take care of each other. No color, no politics, just human beings, and we all need each other.
Bear, there's a lot of people joining us tonight that are here because they're worried about how divided we are in politics and just culturally. Is there anything you want to say to them?
Well, this film is about extraordinary people doing extraordinary things with no red and blue in the corner. Just average Americans, natural Americans, doing things like helping and educating and feeding people. And my message would be that in the end, everybody's going to look back. Let's make it worth it by being together. Let's make it worth it by being united.
I'm so moved, Bear, that your message of hope and optimism, despite all of the things happening around you and the challenges that we're facing, it's really inspiring. So thank you so much, Bear, for this. Thank you so much, Bear, for being with us tonight.
You're welcome, Ben. I love you, brother.
I love you too, Bear.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
You know, one of the best things about making this film was getting to travel all around this country and meet people from different cultures and different walks of life. I mean, I think we're also siloed in our own bubbles that when you get outside of that, it really helps you to see and hear each other. I'd like to take it over to two more friends that are doing this important work. Pierce and Andrew, are you guys there? Can you hear me?
Hey, Ben.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us tonight. I'd really love to just pass it to you guys to have the conversation with each other, but maybe we can start by Pierce. Can you just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do?
Yeah, I'm Pierce Godwin in Durham, North Carolina, founder of Listen First Project and the Listen First Coalition.
So Pierce, tell me how the Listen First Coalition is working together with others to maximize impact.
Yeah, like so many folks who have gotten involved in this work, I thought, imagine the greater impact we could have together. And so we gathered up, all the organizations that existed at the time, and that became the first National Week of Conversation in 2018. So, Andrew, you've been a Hollywood star, you've been a professional soccer player, and a tech entrepreneur. Why are you here today?
It just came out of necessity. I think the whole country feels like we're in trouble. We have a broken relationship with each other, a broken relationship with our government. So the idea with the Meeting of America is that we need to have an emergency family meeting, if you will, and an emergency town hall meeting. And we need to do it at scale. This is a huge, huge year for America. It's a wake-up call. This is the time for us to kind of reboot, restore, reimagine what America is supposed to be in the next 100 years.
Yeah, I'm hoping everybody who watches the film will want to translate that hope into action. And I think the best way to do so is just signing up and becoming part of the community at your reunitedstates.tv website. By doing so, we'll keep them in the loop about America Talks and National Week of Conversation and the Meeting of America and so many other opportunities. And I've been blessed to witness and be a part of many over the years, but I've never been more powerfully moved than I was at a barbershop rap session. Check it out.
My name is True Pettigrew, resident of Cary, North Carolina, and I am the founder and president of True Access. True Access is an inspiration and empowerment organization that helps to bridge gaps. And a lot of that lately has been in areas of race relations.
We're taking a stealing in progress from 9101 West Florissant.
In 2014, when Michael Brown was killed by Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, I felt a range of emotions that affected me in a way that I didn't really expect. And a lot of that is because of my own upbringing and my own experiences. I was on the receiving end of excessive force by law enforcement. And the difference now, though, is I have a son. I felt compelled to do something to protect my son from this same type of actions or incidents. I said, I've got a good mind to go down to the Cary Police Department and let them know how I feel. And so the guys in the shop were like, yeah, True, you the man, go down there, let them have it. And that's what I did. The next day, I walked through the doors of the Cary PD, and the officer that I was introduced to, JB, he listened to understand. Not just to reply, not to be defensive. He wanted to understand where I was coming from, my heart, my pain. He then challenged me and he said, and what are some things you think you and I can do together? And what started off as conversations that involve law enforcement and the Black community has expanded significantly to include members of the community from all walks of life. They all have a role to play in helping to build a healthier, stronger community.
That's awesome. It just shows you how life happens and it can move you. And then all of a sudden you start moving other people because life moved you.
We're so honored to have True and JB with us to talk about that experience, to talk about what they've built together. Guys, thank you so much for being here and being such inspiring examples on this mission to heal America.
Hey, JB and True, JB, I think you're sideways there.
So you want me upright? Okay, this is going to be interesting.
There we go.
You don't understand the delicate balance it took to get to where we are right now. So I've got things stacked on top of things. It's kind of. I hope a kid doesn't come in from your right over here or left, whichever side. So
we just saw that clip, and it would be awesome just to hear a little back and forth from the two of you. And True, when you walked into that police station and were prepared for what you thought the reaction was going to be, were you surprised at the reaction you actually got from JB?
I was surprised as to how it turned out. I was nervous, right? And there was a lot of anxiety walking through those doors, because the way that I felt about law enforcement at the time is I wanted to avoid them because of some of the experiences that I had. And it's weird to say what I'm about to say because I still went through those doors anyway, but I felt like I was going to be dismissed. I felt like whoever I met with was going to be very defensive and dismissive. And I was pleasantly surprised at how receptive, empathetic, and understanding JB was, quite in all seriousness.
So JB, when he came in there, what kicked in for you immediately? What was the first emotion, and how is it connected to your own life experience and how you reacted?
I wish I had like a fantastic movie answer for you, but the reality is professional police departments serve citizens, and True was worried as a citizen about what was happening in our country. And I think when you boil it down to that, I try to make things as simple as possible in an unsimple world sometimes. That's what he needed. He needed reassurance that we were going to serve him and Meek and Austin. And I think that's what he left that day. He told me later, he said, I expected you to be dismissive and just sort of entertain me and rush me out. And that's how low the bar was for True. And all I had to do was not be dismissive, right? And so to not do that sort of shocked his system.
Yeah. For a country that's very suspicious of everybody right now, how do you think that moment can teach all of us?
So the other piece to this is when he left, he invited me for lunch at his house. And you don't get the full version of me, but I've never passed up a meal. Not to mention in the South, that's kind of what we do. Like we break bread and we have conversations. And so anybody who will walk in and meet a stranger and then invite him for dinner, that means a lot just based on its face. And so the first interaction we had outside the police department was at his house. And so that was, he fed me, Meek made an amazing meal. And that's that piece that I think often gets missed in our story is he opened up the doors to his own home to a stranger. And that sort of speaks to the character of the person. And I think that's what we try to shoot for is if we can have these conversations, be it the barbershop or the police department or somebody's house, you're going to find the humanity in that person that you can connect with and then take it, where we are today.
So True, I'll throw this softball to you. This is an easy one. If you think about all the people who are watching this film, and we know we're in desperate need of people taking a risk and having the courage to literally go outside their comfort zone, what would be your charge to people based on this experience and why it's just so crucial for people to take that risk?
Well, because that's where growth occurs. Right? To answer that question quite simply, I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is where and how we grow. As we've all heard it, right? Nothing great happens or occurs in the comfort zone. And I think we're uncomfortable talking about issues of race. And if we don't embrace that comfort and face those fears, we will never make any progress. If we don't take the time, I hear people say, well, we can't just talk about it. And JB and I have this conversation all the time. Now, I agree, it needs to lead to some action steps, but that doesn't even occur until we're willing to sit down and have a conversation. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but the temporary sting of discomfort that you feel by having that initial conversation pales in comparison to the consequences that we're all experiencing now from not having that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. God bless y'all. Thank you so much for your courage, your service, and your example that I know is going to inspire many more Americans to build bridges across divides. It's an honor to know you.
Thank you, Pierce. And thank you for the work that you do as well. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Awesome lineup coming up with several more inspiring stories of how we can heal America.
Okay, great. I would love to just keep this evening moving along. There's a lot of conversations that we're going to have tonight, and the next group is already waiting for us. So we'll just get underway and take us over to Jackie. If you can hear me, I'd love to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Sure, Ben. Thanks so much. And thanks for having me. I'm Jackie Salet. I'm president of independentvoting.org, coming to you from Lower Manhattan.
New York City. I miss it, my alma mater, a city that's been through a lot in the past year. Jackie, I'd love to start this with a clip, and if you can set it up for us, I know you have some things to say about this. Why don't you go ahead and just jump right in?
In this film, we get to meet some wonderful people who've stepped out of the box and put themselves on the line to change the way that we see each other as Americans and the way we do politics. And one of them is a very special person who I've known over the years, who I have deep respect for. He ran as an independent candidate for governor of Kansas, Greg Orman. Let's take a look.
There's no question there are obstacles that independents face. Oftentimes they're prohibited from participating in debates. They try to make it like the independent doesn't have a chance to win, and therefore why would you vote for him? My process for becoming an independent has occurred over a long period of time. My dad was a Republican and my mother was a Democrat. Becoming an independent may have been a way to bridge the divide between my mother and my father.
Greg always uses the analogy of a couple going through a bitter divorce. We've gotten to a point where we do hate each other so much. And maybe we need a mediator, and maybe that's what independent politicians could be.
This is my daughter, Imogen. The country that we're creating is the country I'm leaving to my two little girls. And that's one of the reasons I continue to work so hard to break the stranglehold, because it's put us in a very, very bad spot. We're going to continue to make progress, but it's going to take a long time. Okay, I think you're good.
So I'm so excited to have two amazing people who are just wonderfully important leaders and creators of the independent movement in our country. So let me ask them each to say hello and introduce themselves to you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jesse Fields. Great to be here. I'm a primary care physician in the Harlem community, and I'm in New York City.
My name is Nick Troiano. I'm the executive director of Unite America, based in Denver, Colorado.
Jesse, you work as a physician in Harlem, and you've been on the front lines of the pandemic. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing as we now enter into the second year of COVID?
Well, I have been seeing many patients who have been affected by the pandemic, who have COVID-19. Our practice was impacted in terms of doctors being out sick or being deployed to the hospital because of the overwhelming numbers of patients who the hospital was seeing and patients needing to go there. One of the experiences I had was talking to family members about their ill relatives, and they're not being able to see them because of the pandemic and the precautions of not spreading the infection. So this is something that my practice and my experience is very much, I think, an example of the disproportionate, devastating impact of the pandemic on communities of color and poor communities.
I wanted to follow up on that if I could, just a little bit. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you came to believe that an independent political movement is important both to deal with the healthcare crisis in our country, the concerns of the African American community, and really for all Americans. How did you come to feel that way?
Well, I came to that conclusion in that through an experience, my own experience of growing up poor in the Black community in the old South Philadelphia Black community. We lived in the rooms above my grandmother's restaurant. My mother was a teenage unwed mother, and I had the experience. I had meningitis when I was 7. And my family took me to the hospital, and they were told that I just had a cold and to take me home and give me aspirin. My mother took me back and demanded that I be treated, that I was more seriously ill. By then, it was clear I had a high fever, I was very sick. And my grandmother told me that this tall white woman, pediatrician, had saved my life and that I should become a doctor like her. And I wanted very much to become a doctor and to be kind of like my grandmother, to be someone who made a difference in the community, who helped people by being an example, a mentor, and a role model who could help people move out of poverty, and particularly to encourage young people to go into professions. So I worked on the west side of Chicago my first years out of residency, and I saw what people's lives were like. I saw the depth of poverty, of segregation, of inequality, and how people were living, and that, of course, was impacting on their health. I had met with the Democratic Party elected official who was the district leader, and he invited me to come speak at a church, and I realized that the community's relationship to politics was through the Democratic Party. It was really one of getting crumbs. And so I realized that transformation was necessary, not just being a constituency of one political party, but real transformation for the community. And so that's how I got involved in independent politics. As I see it, is a vehicle for transforming the conditions in which people live.
I want to ask both of you a question about the dynamics of running for office as an independent. If you run for office as an independent, one of the first things that happens is that somebody says, you're going to be a spoiler. Just share some thoughts on that, would you both? Nick, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I ran for Congress as an independent in 2014, in part because I was dismayed that both parties couldn't agree on anything, and all the problems that Dr. Fields mentioned were going unsolved. And what I learned was that they actually do agree on one thing, which is to make it very difficult, if not impossible, for any new competition to enter the system. So that's the challenge. But a big challenge, maybe the biggest to get over, is this spoiler idea that you mentioned, the perverse working of our system that voters think, if I support the candidate I like the most, I might have the impact of electing the person I like the least. And so that's why after my campaign, my focus shifted to changing these electoral rules. If we had something like an instant runoff and ranked choice voting system, voters wouldn't need to worry about spoiling the election, and it would help level the playing field for independent candidates.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so well put. And for sure, the fact that, we're now looking at a situation where 41% of the country consider themselves independents, and in many states they're locked out of that decision-making round of voting. Jesse, let me turn to you and ask you about this. Do you think that the two parties have basically let the American people down? Is that where things have come to at this point?
I think they have, and the fact that over 40% of people self-identify as independents is a sign that people want to move away from these parties, that people realize that they have failed. And I think this is relevant not only to people of color, but to poor and working white communities who have not, I think, had the benefit of real genuine leadership, what it means to actually bring people together and to really allow for public policies that allow people to grow and develop and have just a basic economic foundation.
All right, well, we're going to come back and thread the needle to there, but I want to turn to Nick Maybe you could say something to us about the election, the post-election period, the events at the Capitol, all of that.
Sure. If we go back a month, what we saw was unprecedented since 1812 and our Capitol being breached by a violent mob. I think that hit home for a lot of Americans, and particularly for elected leaders. What precipitated that was a president and his allies saying, you better pressure the folks in Congress to fight for you. Otherwise, we will, quote, primary the hell out of them. And it showed that the vote to overturn the election was perhaps a principled vote for some, but for most, it came out of fear of being primaried in the next election. And I think that connection has become much more acute for people, to connect the dots between the incentives these folks face, who we elect, and then their behavior. And if we actually want to change their behavior, we actually have to change what they're incented to do.
Thank you both so much for being a part of this conversation. And I know, like me, that you both are very inspired by the film and by the conversations that the film has already provoked even before it's out, which is a good sign. And so take good care of yourselves and be safe and be well. And I'm sure we will meet again in person, hopefully in the not too distant future, and keep doing all the wonderful work that you both are doing. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
My daughter would tell you, let's get on to the issues that she died for. My daughter was not a leader. He just drove into a crowd, and she was the one who happened to die. I don't want other mothers to be in my spot. I don't want other mothers to go through this. Heather would never want this attention on her. I'm just trying to make something positive out of this horrible situation. We as white people, we still have layers of protection that other people don't necessarily have. Part of the reason I do what I do is because parents are losing their kids in tragic circumstances all the time. That's what I'm trying to prevent.
That was powerful. Susan Bro's story, of course, people are familiar with her daughter, Heather Heyer, and we all remember when she was lost in Charlottesville, but it's remarkable to see how her mother found purpose following that tragedy.
Yeah, that was one of the most moving clips from the whole film. I'm Kieran O'Connor, a proud progressive and a former staffer for Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton.
I'm John Wood Jr., conservative, former vice chairman of the Republican Party of Los Angeles, and a former Republican nominee for Congress.
And together, we lead the work of Braver Angels, the nation's largest organization dedicated to depolarizing the country and bringing liberals and conservatives together at the grassroots level.
Our work is about restoring the spirit of American democracy, about restoring our ability to create a culture of community together that is anchored in the idea that through goodwill, we can rebuild trust, and through the rebuilding of trust between Americans, we can rebuild the stability and the functionality of our politics.
And we offer concrete ways for Americans to expose themselves to those with whom they disagree, to clarify disagreements, reduce the stereotype thinking that we all do, and ultimately build the trust that's needed to explore and achieve common ground in good faith. John, why don't we go ahead and welcome two of our original Braver Angels, Greg Smith and Kuyar Mustafi.
Bringing in the OGs.
What's up, Kuyar?
Hey, how you doing, Kieran?
Good, man. How you doing?
I think I'm here.
There you are.
How's that?
There he is.
What do I look like? Hey,
looking
man of
good.
the hour.
Yeah.
So, glasses on or glasses off?
Greg,
Well,
you look like you've lost about 100 pounds.
You do, man.
I have lost over 111.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
Oh, wow.
It's great to have you guys with us. And maybe could you talk a little bit about how you first met and what was that like?
I'll yield to Kuyar.
All right. Yeah. I met Greg back in April of 2017 through one of the very first workshops conducted by then Better Angels, now Braver Angels. And the workshop was about having a weekend retreat where between 7 or 8 Trump supporters, people that voted for President Trump, would meet with people that voted for Hillary and see if they can just, have a conversation and learn about each other's motive and learn as to why each side voted the way they did. And, as a someone who has associated myself with the Democratic Party for such a long time, I was curious and I accepted the invitation for that workshop because I didn't have many Republican friends. I did not have a very deep and meaningful conversation with people of the other side. So I was curious to learn about why people voted for Trump. And at the workshop, Greg and I did some of the exercises together, and we were sitting next to each other and we started the conversation, and that's when the friendship started.
Greg, what was that experience like from your end?
From my end, I went, I noticed it on Facebook. Somebody pointed it out to me and said, you ought to go do this. And I had the attitude I was going to go there and help, I was going to help some Democrats figure things out. And when I got there, it didn't take long that I learned that this is not about getting anybody's mind changed, but maybe to let their hearts change and to be able to talk civil to people. And I've got a lot of Democrat friends from previous years and that, but I met Kuyar there and I had some great questions for him. I had some real important questions because the ISIS thing was really big at the time. And
now, was religion a barrier between you guys? I mean, because
he's Muslim and I'm Christian, but I didn't see it as a barrier. But I'd seen it something that that I've learned since then. And in my Christianity, one of the things I try to overcome daily is fear, and you do that with faith. So faith over fear has played a major role in my life since I gave my life to the Lord. So I don't really have a fear of it, especially just to sit down and talk with a man. He's an American and he's here. And I just knew I had a lot of questions for him. And when he told me that his religion had been hijacked, I related to that. And I'm like, well, mine is trying to be hijacked as well. So I felt. So I think it just made things. And then we started talking about food and it was on. So the friendship just grew from there.
And your friendship began sort of at the dawn of the Trump presidency. What was that like for you guys, sort of staying in contact and staying friends, even as all the craziness was happening in the political arena, Kuyar?
To me, having that friendship was very helpful because there were days that I was very disappointed, very devastated, frankly, by the news coming from, the administration, all their policies, everything that, was at odds with the picture of America that I wanted to be painted. Having the friendship with Greg would kind of ground me, would help me kind of cool down and look at it from the perspective that, well, okay, my great friend, Greg, loves Trump. He is happy with the state of things. And I trust Greg. I know him to be a man of faith. I know him to be a man that cares deeply about his community, his country, his family. That helped me a lot because hadn't I not had that friendship, I would have chalked all of that up to animosity and just people from the right being the enemies of the state and, wanting and wishing the worst for this country. And having this friendship saved me from those negative feelings.
Greg, I want to ask you the question in a hard way because I'm listening to Kuyar and I can just imagine a lot of folks hearing Kuyar right now and saying to themselves, well, that's great. He's got, especially if they're, anti-Trump, a lot of people listen to Kuyar saying, that's great. He's got a warm, cuddly friendship with this guy who supports a racist, a guy who supports a fascist, X, Y, and Z. And Greg, I know you've got people in your life. I feel like this has got to be true, who are probably looking at you and maybe even saying to you, hey, you're playing footsies with folks who, are liberals, progressives. What do you say to people who ask, why should you even be friends with somebody if you don't agree on the direction of our nation?
Well, first of all, it's really simple since I gave my life to the Lord, because the Bible says, what I follow, God's word, says to be kind, says love everyone. And I tell people at all the churches and everywhere, my friends, and you're right, I do have some friends that just don't understand why I'm even doing this. But I go back to the Bible frequently, and I go back to look just to say I did, and it hasn't changed. It doesn't say, there's no if, and, or but there. It says love everyone, period.
And I have one more question. Obviously, we're now at a new administration, and I think that there's people who hope we're turning a corner, and lots of people are talking about unity. At the same time, I think you have a lot of folks on the red side who still believe the election was stolen and might not change their mind about that anytime soon. Greg, how do you think we can move forward given the divides that remain and given the fact that oftentimes people might not even be living in the same reality?
I think what I have to say to my fellow Reds, my conservatives, my Christians, my Republicans, is we have an opportunity. We're not Trump and done, okay? The world didn't end. God still reigns. Everything's still going as, you know, as God would plan. He's in charge anyway. And I just pray. I pray for Biden, President Biden. I pray for him. I pray for his administration. My prayer is that they do the right thing. You know, do what's best for the country. You know, so I think for us, we just have to be a light, and we have to be set the example. Don't go out acting crazy and doing crazy things. You know, just.
And Kuyar, what's your message as a blue who's representing a side who just won an election?
My message is we need to reach out to the other side, and we need to listen. We need to listen to what the other side has to say, and just be patient and not jump into conclusions. Don't label people. Don't automatically assume that people on the right have the worst of intentions. We need to understand their worldview. We need to understand and learn where they're coming from. Our worldview don't form in just a few short period of time. It is formed in our entire lifetime. And by understanding each other and by understanding each other's worldview, we can really understand, you know, the concerns and the fear of the other side. And once we understand those, we can address it a lot better. Two sides cannot come to an agreement if they don't talk to each other. We need to talk to each other, and more importantly, we need to listen to our concerns and their concerns.
Well, I just want to close it out by saying for everybody who's listening here that Greg, Kuyar, what you're seeing here is really an example of courage, because these two individuals, they do take a lot of criticism. They do take a lot of heat. They do take a lot of pain for being willing to stand up and say that they see the humanity in one another. And you don't have to agree with either of them, their politics, to recognize the character and the conviction that it takes to be able to stand up for goodness and for mutual human dignity in that way. And we need that in America. So Greg, Kuyar, thank you guys both for setting the example. And I hope that it's an example that everybody watching decides to follow as well. Thank you both.
Thank you, John.
It was our pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kieran. God bless you guys.
Okay.
Peace.
All right, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.
I'm John Gable. I guess I should introduce the next part. So I'm John Gable. I'm with All Sides. I am one of the bridgers I think you're meeting today. I'm an old technologist, Republican, and I live in San Francisco now, which of course being a Republican makes me very popular here, originally from Kentucky, and do a great deal of work with Joan Blades. Joan.
Yes, I'm from Berkeley, California. I'm a co-founder of Move On and a progressive all the way through, but John is my really good friend. And we love working together on shared projects, living room conversations, and All Sides.
Yes, we do a great deal together. And we came from different places, not just politically and small Kentucky town versus Berkeley, but kind of how we approach the problem. So I'm an old technology guy. Some of y'all may remember Netscape Navigator. I became the team lead product manager that way back when. And about 24 years ago this month or last month, I gave a speech where I thought that the internet might train us to discriminate against each other in new ways. That the way the information flows, the way it teaches us to think in stereotypes, metaphorically, might actually cause problems. And oh my gosh, it got a lot worse than I had ever imagined. And so when I, about almost 9 years ago, decided to try to do something about it, my co-founder and I started building technology to help people see different perspectives, get information, kind of break through the one-sidedness and the made up stuff to actually see what was going on and to help people get free of those bubbles. And then I met Joan.
And that was in Washington, D.C. at a group that was trying to bring bridgers all across the country together. Funny that we met there when we were actually in San Francisco and Berkeley physically. But we met, and what I've been doing is the grassroots side, because what I've seen is that people, when they have the intention to do good things, they do them. And so we've been doing these 6-person self-facilitated structured conversations for a number of years already at that time. And we don't even hear each other until we have a connection with each other. And that was how we connected, because John's got all this great information. I look at all sides and I go, whoa, that's why we're living in different narratives, as I see left, right, and center side by side about the very same thing. And it just seemed like we needed to work together.
And we did. We started a schools program, which we called All Sides for Schools, but it's really a nonprofit run by All Sides and Joan at Living Room Conversations with Mediators Foundation. And all we did was provide this to schools, and teachers understood it immediately.
So it's happening in schools, it's happening in faith communities and libraries, and individuals are just showing up because, there are people that have said, I don't want to talk to those people, but there's a whole other group of amazing people that are saying, wow, I think we really have to fix this. And so we are thrilled to be working with those people that are saying, we need to fix this.
One of the fun things we got to do while we were traveling was meet some extraordinary people, different organizations and individuals all over the place. And one couple we met was David and Erin Leverton. I think people underestimate the incredible power of just really, truly listening to the other person and understanding it. And David shows that in a beautiful way. And his wife, Erin, they did some remarkable stuff.
I went on this journey trying to figure out what's causing the problem, and I found out that I'm part of the problem.
It exposed something in myself that I didn't want to see, that's deeply rooted in all of us.
The belief that certain people have more value than others.
It has been hard for me to come to terms with the darkness that lies within inside of me. And that darkness judges people before I meet them. And that's a hard thing to face.
It was horrendously difficult and full of tears, asking the question, what in the hell are we doing right now? Why are we here?
We have no home to return to. We have no job to return to. I've never felt more irresponsible in my life. But the transformation that we're going through in our minds and in our hearts is worth every penny of this.
So we felt a responsibility to take these stories and to share them with people like me who don't know there's a problem. And that feels impossible.
When I look at this nationally, it's hard to be optimistic. But meeting people across the country who have a passion to see our divisions healed, that gives me hope.
What a wonderful story about really deep listening, and even when it's hard.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. But there are lots of other ways we can listen to each other. There are lots of other organizations and people doing things that give us the opportunity to really understand each other. And in fact, I think that's what's happening next. So, Tim, it's all yours.
Thanks, Joan, and thanks, John. I'm Tim Schreiber, the co-founder of an organization called Unite. I'm thrilled to be joined by the producers, the executive producers of the film, The Reunited States of America, Meghan McCain and Van Jones, both decorated authors, media personalities, contributors to the common good in our country from two different sides of the political spectrum. So welcome, Meghan and Van, and thank you for the work you've done on this film. So I guess I want to start by just asking both of you if you have a story that drew you to the film. What if there's a reason you're involved in this film, that you wanted to be engaged in this work? Was there a moment or an incident that drew you to the film and to this movement?
I think Meghan was born into this movement. I don't think I think her last name, but I'll let you speak for yourself, Meghan.
Yeah, I mean, I just loved the concept. I thought it was such a beautiful idea, showcasing, so many individuals that are putting their money where their mouth is and actually going out and trying to enact real change and come together and bridge divides. I thought it was just, like a really important topic for the moment, a really important tone shift. And it's in the spirit of what I love about the country. It's in the spirit of what I always loved about politics, which is unfortunately getting fewer and far between right now. But I don't know. And then there's just so many wonderful stories like Susan Bros and the Levertons. And I just, think these are people that really deserve the same kind of platforms that Van and I have. And it's really a privilege to be a part of this.
Yeah, I agree. And, look, I think a lot of people, even when they hear the title, they think, well, maybe America was never as united as it should have been. And I think that's an important kind of starting point, which is, we've gotten to a place now where we really are giving up, it seems like to me, on the idea that we could ever get together. And that's scary. I mean, that's how you wind up with a Rwanda or Syria. I mean, like you can't, you got to think, what's the alternative to uniting the country? The alternative is the dysfunction we have now or worse. And I don't think anybody wants to sign up for that. And I think that, what's brought me to this place is, knowing folks like Meghan, knowing folks like S.E. Cupp, and also knowing people at the grassroots level who are conservatives and who are some of the best people in the country, period. People who are in small towns in America, who are holding together, neighborhoods and families and communities with just their big hearts and their hard work, and who are misunderstood because of who they vote for, or whatever they're reading, and some dumb thing they may have said on the internet or said to their grandkid. I know that we have the opposite problem of what the media is trying to tell us. The media is trying to tell everybody the problem is you got awful people in the other party ruining the country, and that's what's wrong. And let's just focus on these awful people in the other party. In my view, and I've lived it, I've seen it, I don't have to guess, is that you got awesome people in both parties, all races, all backgrounds, who frankly just don't know what to do with this much chaos, who just don't know how to start, who don't even know where to turn. We have an awesome people problem, much bigger than the awful people problem. And I think this documentary lifts up a lot of awesome people. And I think we need to do that more.
So Van, I want to press you on this because you just said some things that on the left would almost be considered inflammatory, that some of the best people in the country are on the other side. And I'll ask you this too, Meghan, if you could tell your side one misunderstanding they have about the other side, what's your message back to your, if I can put it this way, your camp about what they don't get about people who are on the other side, people who are watching the other network, people who are registered in the other party? What don't people on the left understand about those folks?
Well, that we all ultimately truly do want the same things. We just have vastly different ideas of how to get there. And that people are angry because it comes from pain. That is what's happening in the country, that they're so angry at us that they don't, and I say us as a conservative, people are so angry at conservatives because they see, as Van just said, the world, coming apart and being so chaotic, and they have to blame someone and they have to blame some entity. And I think that if we can get past the anger and know that we're all just hurting right now and ultimately want to get past this, that's what I would say. I mean, and it sounds kind of like, trite and anecdotal, but I really do I really have found that leading with love in most conversations really does work, at least for me, with people that hate me. And you know, it can be disarming just to sit and have a conversation, and it's not sexy, and it's not the type of thing that gets, you know, clicks or ratings, but is the type of thing that does real work and enacts real positive change.
Look, I think on our side, first, you know, we have legacies of historical trauma often. When you're talking about, you know, African Americans, you're talking about Jewish Americans, you know, women. So there is a level of real fear that we have on our side. And I think that we sometimes don't understand the way that even though we feel powerless, to our opponents, we seem very powerful. There's a way, it's like, no, it's not possible. Like, you know, they've got the Supreme Court and they've got this and they've got militia and blah, 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 blah. Well, hold on a second. If you think we're not powerful, get on the wrong side of Black Lives Matter and see how quickly, you know what I mean? You know, we have power too in social media, in the academy, and Hollywood and other places. And so we're in this weird sort of, you know, standoff where we have different kinds of power and we're afraid of each other. And I think people are surprised when I say, and again, you know, I've spent my entire life working on racial justice. I've helped to close 5 abusive youth prisons. I've helped to reform 2 police departments, pass 18 or help pass 18 bipartisan criminal justice bills. So I was woke before they had alarm clocks. Okay, I've been working on racial justice, criminal justice. I think my credentials there are pretty strong. I think people are surprised when they hear the last time I went to jail, I was not marching with Black Lives Matter. I was marching with coal miners in a successful fight to get them their pensions back and their health care back. I'm from Tennessee. I'm a red state kid. I understand these fights. And if you're in your mid 50s and you're a white guy and maybe didn't go to college, the world doesn't look like a safe place for you right now. And that doesn't give them an excuse to believe a bunch of nonsense, or nobody's got an excuse to go tear up the Capitol. We've been here 400 years, haven't torn up the Capitol. So I'm not talking about those extremes. I'm talking about the grief, not just the anger, but the grief of some dreams that haven't come true and a future that you're not sure about and you don't know where to turn. And we know a little bit about grief. We know a little bit about broken dreams. And there can be some empathy here. I'm not saying for you to let your guard down. I'm not saying to put yourself in harm's way. But I am saying that there's a misunderstanding here that on the other side of, everybody's gonna be better off.
So Van, in the movie, there are so many poignant scenes. I'd love to hear if either or both of you have a scene that you remember the most. One of the scenes that struck me was when Michelle Brown talks about losing her child, losing her baby, and her sense that she lost her baby in part because of racism, or maybe directly. And you just kind of, at least in my case, you want to stop the film. There are points in which you want to just stop the film and reach out and reach across, and just, it's almost like the grief moments sometimes can feel overwhelming. How do we think about one another? How does this film help us think about healing grief? I mean, we talk about politics so much, but some of this is just not about politics, right? What do we do to heal the grief, Megan? I mean, how do we start?
Well, for me, what I would say is that, you know, even just acknowledging, to me, this is so far beyond a political crisis. It's so far beyond an economic crisis. It's so far beyond a public health crisis. This has become a spiritual crisis, a crisis of meaning and purpose and community. When Joe Biden says, I want to heal the soul of America, that word soul to me, you know, coming out of the Black church, it means a lot. We need to cut each other some slack. I was talking to Megan earlier about Orson Welles and War of the Worlds, and how Orson Welles, you know, generations ago, tricked everybody on radio into thinking that Martians were invading. And people really thought it was real. And there were riots, and some people actually killed themselves because the media that they were consuming had tricked them into seeing the world differently than it actually was. Nobody here would say, well, I hate the people who fell for that. you say, God, my God, I feel so sorry for those people. They took their own lives because they got distorted media. We are all in a little bit of a war of the world scenario, in that all of us, because of partisan media, social media, the algorithms, we're getting a slightly distorted view of what's happening. And then we're starting to react, and then we react to the reaction. So we're all now disoriented and upset and confused and concerned. And so the common ground is that sense of disorientation, that sense of anxiety and dread. And how do you deal with that? With some compassion. Doesn't mean you excuse the inexcusable. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's ever said that. But it does say that for the vast majority of people, a little bit of compassion goes a long way. And there is good work to be done, at least to help, you know, kids and other people who need our help. But that's really where I just think that we're victimized. The people who you don't like, they're being victimized. And frankly, we're all being victimized because none of us are getting the straight story anymore. We're all in a war of the world scenario.
Yeah. So Megan, maybe I can just turn to you. And I know we just don't have much more time, but in the movie, as you said at the beginning, we see average Americans confronting violence, confronting hatred, confronting ignorance, confronting racism, but they take steps, right? These are people who have stood in the face of violence and they're making a move. Was there a moment in the film where you thought to yourself, this really gives me hope in the future, that average Americans are taking these big risks on each other?
I mean, Susan's entire story is a story of hope. I mean, you know, she lost her daughter in violence and political violence, and she's, you know, eternally optimistic. She is not blaming anyone. She is, you know, going into situations where she's saying, you know, this can't happen to anyone else, and she's doing grassroots work. I don't know what kind of attitude I would have if my child had died in such a tragic way. So I think the whole movie is obviously, you know, I found the whole thing incredibly inspirational. I also found some of the stories, like you mentioned, Michelle, I had just had a baby at you know, I have a 4-month-old, so I just had a child myself, and her story, I actually had a hard time watching it and getting through it, and I had to rewind it a few times. And I think that if you don't understand systemic racism, you need to hear her story. You need to understand that, you know, we can have conversations about, you know, what our country can do and where we need to go. But the fact is, when I went into the hospital having a child, there wasn't a situation that a nurse was going to let me have a child die in the waiting room. It just wasn't going to be an option for Meghan McCain. So I think that there's stories in there that are very easy to digest and very easy to understand, that don't automatically put people on the defense. And I thought the fact that she was capable of sharing that story on camera was incredibly brave and incredibly poignant. And for me, I think that one in particular is something that I think even the most jaded person who doesn't want to confront or talk about issues concerning, you know, racial inequality in the country, that's a very, very simple, straightforward, horrific, heartbreaking story that, you know, anyone can watch, and I don't see how you can't understand it.
Yeah. So Van, your former boss was fond of saying, when you're in a hole, stop digging. That great quote that captures so much of, and to me, at least, this film is about, you know, we're in a crisis, but we can actually stop digging. Like we can take small steps. We can stop making it worse. You look ahead right now. This film was filmed, you know, finished almost a year ago. It's just as powerful today. In fact, things in some ways have gotten worse than when the film was first finished a few months ago. How do we stop digging right now? I mean, the media, people blame, look, you guys are in politics and the media. I grew up in the same businesses. If you ask people where the blame for the problem is, they say politics and the media. How do we own our responsibility and stop digging?
Well, I mean, a part of it is, you know, supporting films like this, projects like this, trying to get attention for them. You know, a lot of documentaries get completed, that not that many get seen. And, you know, Meg and I are both using our platforms as best we can to get this documentary actually seen. It's really important to me. I think that the average person, honestly, I think I know this to be true. everybody can find something in common with everybody else. I've never met a single person I don't have at least one thing in common. If it's nothing else, then we both listen to Michael Jackson growing up. Whatever it is, there's always something that you have.
Don't dance. Don't dance now. Go ahead. Keep
Exactly.
going.
I said listen. I didn't say dance. But you know, and what we have to begin to do is to develop the habit of starting where the common ground is, which is what you do in real life. In real life, you meet somebody, you quickly. That's why everybody talks about the weather, because at least that's something in common. For some reason, once you jump into media or social media, everybody goes to where we don't agree. And for me, I'm not, you know, I'm not going for agree or disagree. I'm not going for right or wrong. I can put up with a whole lot of disagreement if I understand where you're coming from. If I know your story, if I understand that you came from a country where something bad happened and, you know, you just lost your kid or your, you know, whatever. If I understand where you're coming from, even if we disagree, I still have room for you in my circle of moral concern. And I'm going to behave slightly differently than if you're just a stranger to me in every way. And I don't know who the hell you are, where you're coming from, why you're acting that way, but I'm calling the cops or I'm getting my gun. You know, that's what we've got to get away from, because if at a national level, everybody starts calling their cops and getting their guns, that's called Syria, that's called Rwanda. That doesn't work. And so I think a little bit of love goes a long way. And I don't, you know, when Megan says, you know, leading with love and that kind of stuff, people can roll their eyes. It works on you though. If somebody comes up to you and says, if somebody comes up to you and says, you're a terrible person, you're a stupid, ignorant bigot, you're a cult member and a fool and a dupe. Oh, and by the way, vote for me. You're not going to do that. If somebody comes up to you and says, hey, look, I think you're great. I know you're well-intentioned. I think you could be greater if you also took this into consideration. You'll listen to the same message because it's being put forward with respect and with love. So, you know, we and Meghan McCain and Van Jones, we're not kumbaya people. We're tough partisans. No. Where we think it's important to fight, but we don't want to fight on everything. You can fight on some things, but if you fight on everything, you don't have a country, and that's not where we want to go.
The reunited States of America is a chance to expand your circle of moral concern, Van, as you said, a chance, in my view at least, to learn how to lead with love, as Meghan McCain has just said. We come from different walks of life. We come from different backgrounds. I think that story's been told. But for Americans who are concerned and want to make a difference, this is a film in which the stories of average Americans will awaken your capacity, your hope, your strength to set out, maybe take the first step in the direction of healing the country and maybe even establishing the possibility of the United States of America. Thank you both for your work on this film, for your lifetime of work in defending and promoting the best of our country.
Well, hey, thank you, brother. Same back to you, and thank you for your role in the film as well. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, it's me again. Sorry, I'll keep this brief. I'm just really inspired by that conversation that just happened. There's so much food for thought that we could unpack, but to keep us on schedule, there's one thing I did want to show you guys. It's the website that we built, because it's not a normal movie film website. Let me see if I can just share my screen here. It's really developed to give people tools of how to talk to people across the divide, friends and family. So, you know, if you look here, it looks like you just got normal movie information, but as soon as you start scrolling down, you're already in this experience. And we made this website in partnership with the Braver Angels. You know, the workshops that they have are really helpful to learn these skills. And so there's 3 different tracks you can go down here. You know, always starting with yourself, the sort of cardinal rule, you can't change other people, you can only change yourself. Definitely applies to politics. And, you know, we wanted this to be interactive and kind of fun. So there's a lot of graphics here. Hopefully it's kind of funny and insightful, but it really is the first step on this larger journey. And so you can kind of see when you get into the experience here that there's a slideshow that happens, and you can kind of scan through each one. They've all got a little tip that you can follow and just a piece of advice. You can kind of flick them across. And then I'll show you just the ending of each experience, because this is kind of fun. Not to have any spoilers here or anything, but at the end of each section, there's a little like, hooray. And we wanted this to be really accessible to people and just lower the bar to entry. So we have these downloads here where you can download it to your phone. If you want to keep this lesson with you and just refer to it, it definitely is a daily practice, so it's helpful to have. You could print it and put it on your fridge. You can send it to a friend. So it's really exciting just to have these tools at our fingertips. So if you find it useful, please do share it with a friend. And we wanted to thank our friends at braverangels.org for sharing this wisdom with all of us. We're getting close to the end of the night here, but we still got the amazing cast panel coming up. It's always an incredible discussion. We have Susan Bro and the Levertons and Stephen and Greg, and Mark Gerzon will be there, the author of the book with us. But before that, we have a very short discussion with Benji Backer and Manu Meal to explain sort of the generational perspective on divisions and what millennials and Gen Z are how they're looking at these divisions. So guys, I'd love to kick it over to you. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight.
Thanks for having us, Ben.
Hey, it's great to be here and great to be with my friend Manu. But I mean, it's super important for us to talk about our story and how we got connected, because I'm a conservative activist, lifelong conservative activist. I run the American Conservation Coalition, an environmental organization on the right. And then for you, you've built up this bridge building movement, but you're left of center. And we found a lot of ways to work together. Why do you feel like our generation sees things in more of a bridge building, fight than other ones?
Because I think that our generation has these values of inclusivity and working with people that look different than us ingrained in how we operate. It's not something that we've had to learn. The reality of the situation is that the United States is an extraordinarily diverse country. It's really that young people have a lot of potential. Young people have been at the forefront of lots of movements for change, not just on the left or the right, but for our country.
Yeah, and it really comes down to the fact that I think our generation sees things in a less divisive lens, because there are a lot of problems that we face that are in dire need of being solved. And, obviously Bridge focuses on a lot of them, and my organization just focuses on climate and the environment. But these are issues that we've grown up seeing get worse and worse and worse because of division. And so I feel like there's a difference in our generation where we're very political in the way we think about problems, but we're not political in terms of the partisanship. I consider myself a conservative, but Republican versus Democrat doesn't matter to me. And I feel like you have the same kind of mindset.
I 100% agree with that. And one thing that I do want to acknowledge, for example, it's that we've got to look at democracy as one person at a time. It's one conversation at a time. We have to live together. It's a fact. We're a family. And the only way that we can get over this is by recognizing that each of us has a role to play in how we approach the other person, but importantly, how we suspend our arguments and look at each other as people.
And it actually doesn't mean that because you're a Republican or a Democrat, that you have a completely different world view or a completely different value set than the other side. And we've made it about politics instead of people. And yes, like I'm going to disagree with you on some issues, but we shouldn't hate each other for it, because we have a totally different, upbringing and totally different mindset of the world, but we also can find agreement on certain issues.
And, Benji, I think that for us, and what Bridge USA is doing is it's trying to connect young people with each other. One of my people that I look up to, and I'm sure that you've looked up to as well, Stephen Alacara, he's basically connecting folks, but at the legislator level, right? And he's trying to get these state houses to work with each other and getting congressional members to work with each other. And that is so important. Those steps are so necessary. And so I'm excited, I'm sure you're excited to welcome the next clip, which is really going to be discussing how we as a country can unite these lawmakers on issues that affect every American.
Issues we'll inherit, whether it's climate change or the national debt, are not so much dividing between the left versus right, but really the future versus the past. We decided to create the first ever caucus for young members of Congress.
Welcome, Stephen Olcara, the Millennium Action Project President.
I had a lot of people tell me they would never get Democratic members and Republican members to actually sign on.
So actually you'll now be invited to our annual conference.
I talked to leadership about it first.
I did have some moments where I felt, why do I think I can do anything about this huge problem? As Bobby Kennedy said, young people have the least ties to the past and the greatest stake in the future.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Mark Gerzon. I'm the author of the book on which this film is based, The Reunited States of America. I wrote this book after 30 years of bridging divides in America. The publisher Barrett Kohler has made the ebook of The Reunited States of America available for free download for a short period of time on the Reunited States website. The people you're going to meet, you've already met during this premiere, and the ones you're going to meet now, the cast, they don't identify themselves by where they fall on the political spectrum. They identify themselves by where they stand in their lives and how they stand for this country. And they're everyday heroes. They're my heroes. They're not superstars, they're not famous, but they're people who bring out the best in all of us and represent the best of our country. So I invite you not only to watch the film one day, but to join the movement to reunite America. I think that if it's ever going to happen in Washington, it's going to happen first in our hearts. And that's why we're here tonight, to meet the cast and let them open their hearts to you, and let's meet them now. Could you please join us, everybody? It'd be wonderful to see you all.
Hey, Mark.
Greg.
Mark.
Hey, guys.
Stephen.
Everyone.
Hi, David and Aaron.
Band
Wonderful
back
to be with
together.
all of you.
Sorry, I'm kidding.
Hi.
How is
Wonderful to
everybody?
be with all of you.
Hey, Stephen.
Hey, good to see you guys.
I think Steven's the one we've seen the least of lately.
I know. How have you been?
It's been busy. We're getting ready to embark on a new journey here in Wisconsin, which I'm happy to talk more about offline.
All right.
Good. That's exciting.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm delighted to be with all of you. And if you don't mind, I'll just launch us into a couple of questions for each of you. And then we'll look at some practical tips that maybe we could offer the people who are part of this conversation tonight. But Susan, if you're willing for me to start with you, you've really been on my heart lately because, when some injustice is done to me, I get angry. And when I see something, when politicians lie or when I see people hurt each other, I get angry. And I just wondered, can you talk a little bit about what that journey has been like for you and what you've learned about anger and forgiveness? And I would just love to hear you talk about that for a minute.
Forgiveness is not a word you hear out of my mouth very often. I would say that I'm more about channeling your anger into something useful and constructive, and living in hate is not something I either choose to do. It's like, let it go, let justice have its way, let things happen the way they need to play out, and you deal with it. But channel anger into something constructive. Don't channel it to an inward feeling. However, having said that, my blood pressure is sky high lately, so I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best strategy. We'll see how that plays out.
Well, I admire you for how you've handled it. And I think every time you speak, I learn something. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you've met David and Aaron and you know them. And I want to ask you, David and Aaron, similar question, you set off on a 50-state road trip and what you encountered changed you deeply and forever. What was a moment where on that journey, you had to really work to keep your heart open? And what did you learn from that?
Throughout our journey, I think we went on it with open hearts and open minds, open ears to listen and to learn. We realized that we had a perspective of what America was. It wasn't wrong, it was just incomplete. And we were so blessed by people across the country who opened their hearts up to us as well.
Yeah. And for me, it was the first stop on our trip was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I had the pleasure of meeting a woman who literally changed my life with her story, and we connected as mothers. She shared her birth story. People who've seen the film will know what I'm referring to, and she lost her baby in the delivery room for no other reason than just neglect and believing that her life and the life of her child was not valuable. And it helped me understand how little I understood and how much I had to learn.
Well, I hear humility in both of your stories, and that inspires me. That inspires me. Can I ask you, Stephen, you know, you've done an amazing job, you know, and the film reveals that. You've done an amazing job bringing politicians under 40 together across the divide. And I guess, what's the source of your faith and your hope that the millennial and post-millennial generations will be able to break through this self-destructive pattern? I mean, what makes you think that they won't be divided left against right, just like the older ones?
So this question, Mark, I think was top of mind when we started Millennial Action Project. There's so much hope and promise in this younger generation, but how do we not squander it? Because there are so many forces, political, financial, social, that is fueling polarization, and the path of most convenience is to just continue down the path that the current generation of leadership has been modeling. And so I think what gives me faith is, A, the fact that we do have a movement of people who have signed up to be part of the bridging idea of governance. And I've seen many examples of leaders who were willing to put all of their political capital on the line in service of building that bridge and getting a piece of legislation over the finish line. It shows that there really is courage in this generation, and they're willing to see progress on issues beyond their interest in not only partisanship, but sometimes working against their own prospects for re-election. So that gives me a lot of hope.
Well, it gives me hope too. And when I saw in the film all these younger Democrats and Republicans working together and learning together, it's inspiring. And it makes me want to ask you, Greg, you ran for governor in Kansas. It's a pretty red state. As an independent candidate, you had no choice. You had to reach out to a lot of Republicans. I'm curious, what have you learned about campaigning in a way that connects everybody across the spectrum rather than divides? Most candidates, when they run, they leave their communities more divided than before. How can a candidate run? What's advice you have for a candidate? But how do you run in a way that will reunite America?
Well, Stephen raises an interesting point just in terms of the millennial generation. And I certainly saw that in my campaigning, as well as younger people oftentimes tended to be more open-minded about the idea of an independent candidate. But with that said, I do believe the American people are not nearly as far apart politically as what our politicians and our leaders would both like us to believe and how they behave. And running as an independent really gives you a window into that, because not only do you have to campaign and talk to Republicans, but you have to campaign and talk to Democrats and independents. And when you get all those people in a room together, what you find is we genuinely have a whole lot more in common than we have that separates us. And that's what I'm really working to sort of tease out by creating a third force in our politics that allows people to vote for what they want and what they aspire for, instead of voting against what they hate and what they fear.
Well, I really respect the way you ran, and I feel like the same kind of open heart that Susan was talking about and that the Levertons are showing, that same open heart was in the way you campaigned. But I'm curious, we made this film, we were participating in this film months ago, and a lot's happened since we made the film, including these recent insurrection in Washington. I'm just curious, how are you feeling now? How are you feeling now in terms of your optimism, pessimism, your faith in that we can reunite America, that this isn't just Pollyannish hope for the future, but it's actually a realistic goal? Anybody want to comment on that?
I'm happy to. So after the insurrection, we put out a statement, and there was a phrase in there that has quite a bit of history. And we were looking at the worsening polarization. And at a certain point, we knew that there would be a breaking point. And I think the insurrection was such a visible example of what that breaking point looks like. It's the inevitable conclusion of this political industry run on hate. So in many ways, that moment was not only building for 2 months after the election, I think it was building for at least a decade, if not longer. And so I think the way we need to turn this breaking point into a turning point for renewal is by seeing how we can reframe politics and create a new type of politics that brings out the best in people. And I think the new dividing line is not between Democrat, Republican, and independent. It's between radical hatred or radical love. And I think the insurrection put a fine point on that new divide that's emerging in our country. And we need to do everything we can to fight for love and pluralism and dialogue. That's the best way for our democracy to work.
Anyone else want to comment on this question of how you're feeling now, and whether you share Stephen's optimism? Where are you? How are you feeling?
Well, I would actually echo one of the words that Stephen said, which was inevitable. And the Capitol insurrection, particularly given the circumstances at the time, was not only an act of political violence, but once again, something that was an inevitable result of a system that seems to thrive on dividing people. And I think, again, so I think it's inevitable. It just reinforces for me the need to create an alternative in our politics, the need to create a third force. In the movie, my wife referred to something that I use, an analogy or a metaphor that I use to describe the political environment as being like a married couple going through a bitter divorce. They don't talk to each other anymore. When they do, they mistrust each other's intentions. They don't have shared goals. And asking Democrats and Republicans to unite and solve our political problems is a little bit like putting that bitter divorcing couple in a room and asking them to solve it on their own. It's just not going to happen without the intervention of a third force where we can change the electoral incentives. We can de-emphasize the value of negative campaigning and ultimately force candidates to put forward a positive vision. And so I do believe that January 6th was inevitable. And because I believe it was inevitable, it ultimately doesn't change my perspective on what we need to do to ultimately move forward and eventually get to a point of reunification.
What happened on the 6th, where our capital was breached for the first time since like the War of 1812, something like that, which is really hard to believe. I really can remember looking at that on that day and realizing how close I was to being part of that group. I think when I was engaged in a battle of good versus evil, where I saw my enemy as a force to be defeated and destroyed at any cost, because they were really truly trying to destroy this nation. And so it was a day for me that struck so close to home that so many people, even kind of well-meaning folks, like I felt like I was raised in a good family and things like that, I was on this path. Where does that lead? If this is where we are today, what's the end game there? Is it the destruction of 50 million Americans? And that, I hope would serve as a wake-up call to us all.
And for me, I would say the events of January 6th make me think of Susan Bro. None of us have suffered the way Susan has suffered. And none of us has a voice like Susan has to explain why this has to stop.
Well, I appreciate that thought, but I want to also say my story is really not all that unique. What's unique is the white skin with it. Our country was built on, not only on the backs of Native Americans, but on the backs of slaves, enslaved people. Let me correct myself. They were people who were enslaved, and many of them have suffered for the last 400 years with these kinds of deaths and the hatred that is so unfamiliar to us. So in conjunction with what David and Aaron and all of you are saying, yes, we need to go back to our beginnings, admit our faults, say that we're trying to do better, and sincerely make effort to do better, to fix those problems in our foundation, because until we face dealing with those, until we admit truth and teach truth and speak truth, we really aren't going to get anywhere.
Hey, Mark, I think you're on mute.
This film is a wake-up call, and I wonder if any of you would like to end this panel with just a quick tip about what you think we could do, what ordinary folks like us can do. I've heard things about humility. I've heard things in this conversation about an open heart. I've heard things about a new generation. Anybody want to just do a short sort of like suggestion or two about what you've learned that you think would be practical for people who are part of this wonderful premiere for the Reunited States?
Well, as someone who's traveled throughout the state of Kansas twice now and talked to a lot of folks, I'd say two things. Number one, remember it's hard to hate up close. And, so instead of hiding behind your keyboard or your mobile phone and engaging politically online, go out and talk to people who disagree with you. But in that process, make sure your goal isn't to win an argument, but rather to understand them. And I think if you approach political conversations first with the goal of understanding the other side, as opposed to winning an argument, you'll actually find out that you've got a lot in common. And ultimately, you'll also have a receptive audience on the other side when they realize you genuinely care about what they think.
Thanks, Greg. Anybody else?
I'd like to point out in the film, when I say that to the Levertons at dinner, we do take the time to continue the conversation. And by the end of the evening, I feel like we had grown close. I don't know that we will always agree on everything or disagree on everything. That's not the point. The point is I recognize them as human beings and they recognize me as human. And we were able to get through that simply by the act of talking to one another. And I think that's the whole point of the film, is that in order to make this a reunited States, or maybe I should say an initially United States, we have to talk to one another with the concept exactly like he said, just like Greg said, not to win an argument, but to listen to one another and to find the humanity in one another.
Yeah, I would just add to what Susan said. I mean, you said it beautifully, but our daughter Grace is the reason we went on this trip in the first place. And she was the one, when she was born with Down syndrome, shattered my understanding of what I thought a valuable life is, and helped me to see that there's gold hiding beneath the surface of every human being, and all you have to do is look for it.
Beautiful.
Well, I'll just share a reflection from a dialogue series we did across Wisconsin for 2 years called Red and Blue Dialogues. And one of the funniest things that someone said to me after one of the dialogues was a woman came up to me and she said, Stephen, I can't believe how much I was agreeing with the enemy. And she was both genuinely surprised and also maybe disappointed in herself how much she was agreeing with the enemy. But I think what that process revealed is three things for me. One is, and this relates to our earlier point about January 6th, the amount of media and social media manipulation that's happening on our minds right now to condition us to hate people and see our fellow human beings as the enemy is truly just beyond the pale, I think, right now. And so the moment that we have this reflective self-awareness to know that this is a conditioning from a lot of forces, and we can break out of that mindset, I think is the first step here. The second one is the theme that we've talked about around humility and openness and listening. I often talk about choosing empathy as a muscle that we have to build. And that's a choice and it's a practice that takes time. And I think across all of these dialogues that we did, the people who kept coming back were people who had exercised their empathy muscles, and that allowed them to enter into more divisive conversations in a constructive way. And then the third thing, to be very concrete about this, is we need to elect a different type of political leader. We need to elect leaders who believe in the art of bridge building, who can be role models of empathy and compassion, and who seek a new kind of politics that brings out the best in people. This whole business model that we've been talking about, that's a race to the bottom. That's a choice, but it doesn't have to be our future. We can break out of this. And I'm confident if we do the things that we've talked about here, choosing empathy, actually listening, breaking out of these mindsets, and electing a new type of leader, I think we'll be on a much better path.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank all of you. Each of you bring out the best in me, and it gives me faith and hope just being with you tonight, the same way I think the film will bring it to the folks who watch it. So I just want to say thank you all for being here tonight, and I'm really grateful to all of you. And and I think we'll adjourn. But Aaron, could I ask you to just stay with me for a moment? I'd like to show a brief clip of the film.
Sure, Mark.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
There's a huge division in our country right now, and we wanted to maybe see if we could start a little bit of a conversation to try and break down some walls of division.
Generally speaking, I have to honestly say that I don't have a really great feeling towards white people. A lot of it is because of some of my experiences and some of what I've seen my parents experience. I went into labor with my first child when I was 7 months along, and my water broke while I was walking around the mall with my dad. He was buying baby clothes, and I went to the hospital. The nurse came in and I said, I think I'm having contractions. And she examined me very quickly and she said, oh, you're not ready to have this baby yet. You call me back in here when you're ready to have this baby. And they let me lay there for hours. By the time the doctor came, I was crowning. And my first baby died. And I know that they did not give me the care and the attention that I deserved. I lost my baby because they did not provide proper care for me.
I'm so sorry.
And it's so hard to know that I'm a good person, I'm a good mother, and to have someone look at me or to look at my children as if they're criminals, as if we don't deserve to be respected, we don't deserve to be treated fairly. It does something to you mentally and spiritually and emotionally. I've never forgotten losing my first child because I was a Black, unwed mother. And they didn't think that my child's life was as important as the child being delivered in the room next to me.
Thank you, Aaron, for that powerful moment, for the way you listened to Michelle. That really moves me deeply.
Yeah, it was a very, very life-changing moment for me.
Well, why don't we invite Michelle Brown to join us? I'd love to have you guys meet again. And Michelle, if you would be kind enough to join us, that would be great.
Oh my gosh.
I'd love to be with both of you for a moment.
Hey, Erin.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? It's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you. I've thought about you so many times.
Same here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
That was one of the most powerful moments in the film for me. It really stuck with me. And I'm really curious to listen to you and Aaron talk about how has it affected you? It's been quite a while now since you shot that scene. And I'm just curious, if could either of you talk about how has it changed you or affected you or stayed with you?
For me, it was, I think, one of the defining moments in my life. I think it changed me. It was a healing experience for me. And it brought so many emotions to the surface. And it forced me to deal with some of my views towards whites and how I felt about white people and how I viewed racism in this country. And so some of the things that I, spoke out against and that I didn't understand being judged based on your skin color, being judged based on the history of a people, being categorized, I realized that I was doing the very same thing, that I had done the same thing, especially since that experience. And meeting with Aaron and with David made me realize that it wasn't right to do, and that there were people who were not what I believed all white people were, which was racist, which was that disregarded African Americans, that couldn't empathize with us and our experiences. And Erin on that day did just that. I felt that we were able to connect as women, as mothers, and it really changed my life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I just need a second. Very powerful words. Thank you for sharing that. Same. I mean, that day changed my life. And you were brave enough and kind enough and patient enough with a very ignorant woman to give me this most precious thing, your story. And, you know, there's been so many moments that I've sat in with other people, and your story helped make sense of those moments. And I think I carry you everywhere I go. And I've had a question burning in my heart ever since that day that I want to ask you. Why did you tell me that story? What prompted you to suddenly like bare your heart to this stranger in your office?
For the first time, I felt that you genuinely wanted to hear my story, that you truly wanted to have a conversation about racism and about being Black in America and what that meant and what that looked like, and my personal experience. And as a Christian, I truly felt your spirit. You created an environment for me that was warm and inviting and comforting even. And it allowed me to be transparent. It allowed me to experience those feelings and emotions that I had buried for so long, that I had never really spoken to about, definitely not to another white person, but I really hadn't told that story to anyone but my spouse. And so it was you being able to be really transparent and say, you know, I don't know, I'm here to have a conversation, and just creating this environment that allowed me to open up and to be transparent and to experience those feelings and emotions and to relive that experience with you.
Yeah, it was so good. I was with you in that delivery room. And as you told that story, I saw the faces of each of my children in each of the delivery rooms where I first saw them. And I grieved for you because of what you had to go through for no reason. I mean, and I'll tell you that what you shared that day put me on a path that I couldn't have known to look for, because we had this very unique situation that we were in where we were embarking on this 50-state journey, and you were the first person we met of hundreds and hundreds of people that we sat with and talked with over the course of 14 months. And you gave me a mission in that meeting. It was almost like you commissioned me to go out and find out why this happened. Like, why was this the case for you? Because I did not understand. Like, I could not comprehend why or how the world that I thought was just could treat someone so unjustly. And it really framed my entire, really, I would say it framed my entire life moving forward, because I'm continuing that journey. I'll never stop. I mean, we stopped traveling. We don't live on an RV anymore. Thank God. but I'll never stop until that narrative ends and it's over, and we can look back on that and say it's in the past. I won't stop, because I love you and you are my hero. And I'm so thankful for you.
I love you and David as well. And it's changed the way that I talk about racism and inequalities in our community.
Yeah.
My experience with you has encouraged me to encourage others to have those one-on-one conversations. And it's those one-on-one conversations where people can be genuine and they can ask questions and they can be very blunt and honest. It's those conversations I think that are really going to make a difference.
Michelle, you make me understand why I was so deeply moved by the two of you, because what you've just shared shows what a deep moment it was. And it was healing for me. I hope it's healing for other people who watch the film. And I just want to say thank you to both of you, because it takes courage to open your hearts like that. And it takes courage to talk the way you did tonight. And I'm personally very grateful. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it on behalf of all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Love you. Love you too.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Wow. Pierce, are you there?
Yeah. Hey, Ben.
Hey, thanks for coming back. You know, why we would have a filmmaker and a bridge builder, left-leaning and right-leaning, join forces to put on an event like this, but also is to harness the action that might come out of this.
It's so empowering, right? This is not something that has to happen to us and to me. I've got, like you said, that agency. We can, not to be cliche, but this idea of being the change, right? I mean, that is the only thing that has ever changed anything in America and across the world, is enough folks deciding they're going to chart a different path.
Yeah, and just seeing everyone that's here tonight, I mean, what a turnout. It really does show that there's like a huge groundswell that could happen.
The best way to translate the inspiration of the film into that commitment and into that ongoing effort and mission to heal America was through what we're calling the Heal America Pledge, which is featured on the website.
Yeah, the Heal America Pledge. We're doing the hashtag. It's all starting tomorrow on Friday, but we wanted to announce it tonight. Pierce, can you talk about some of the partners that have already signed on to the pledge?
Absolutely. We've got around 100 partners who, as we've talked about, are doing this work day in and day out.
There is something for you in this movement. What speaks to your heart? And Pierce, the one other thing I'll say is just the title of this pledge, the Heal America Pledge. It's not just that our country is hurting, it's that we're hurting as people, as individuals. All of us have a certain degree of heartbreak. And so the Heal America Pledge is not just for our countries, it's for ourselves. It's for each of us. It's so that we can all start healing. And so the Heal America Pledge, Pierce, are you ready? Why don't we start the Heal America Pledge? You go ahead and say it, and I'm gonna chime in, and then let's just bring it home. Let's just have anybody who wants to say it, say it. See us on the website, watch the movie, tell a friend, hashtag Heal America Pledge. Go ahead, Pierce, over to you.
I commit to the mission of healing America. I will resist demonizing those I disagree with, and instead listen to understand their concerns. I embrace my responsibility to reduce hostility because I believe our shared future depends on it.
I commit to the mission of healing America.
I will resist demonizing those I disagree with,
and instead listen to understand their concerns.
I embrace my responsibility
to reduce hostility,
because I believe
our shared future depends on it.
I commit to the mission of healing America.
I will resist demonizing those I disagree with,
and instead listen and understand their concerns.
I embrace my responsibility to reduce hostility because I believe our shared future depends on it.
Our shared future depends on it.